Can you share any scrap Smolder spells? Were he and Scar the last champs you helped on? There are a few more champs in the pipeline that I've helped on. Can't talk about them, but there are a few more champs still out there that I helped ideate and lock down. For Smolder, there's 2 versions of Smolder that I'll talk about. One is, this is just a simple one, his Q could hit towers. His Q could hit towers. Including like doing things like putting the true damage burn on it. And so we had that in a playtest, and I'm actually the one who got it changed. And what happened is I was like, oh, I can hit towers with this. It is time for split push Smolder. And so I had a playtest where I bought Essence Reaver and a bunch of other stuff. I went bot lane. The enemy team went mid to fight, and during the time that the 4 enemy team members were fighting my team members, I took 3 towers because my Q was just murdering the tower, and that was fun. Pretty cool, cool time. Because he was a dragon, right? You can burn down buildings. It was sweet. And so after that playtest, there was like, don't know if it's okay if this thing hits towers. But it was fun. But did you win? Yeah. No, they had to end the playtest. Because then the next time that the enemy team tried to fight, I went back bot lane, and I did the same thing, and I took all 3 of their base towers and got on their Nexus. And by the time the guy got back, I was like, hey, by the way, I'm about to kill the Nexus. The playtest ends. We don't do something here. So it was sweet. He just was really good at pushing when his Q could hit towers. Another version of Smolder, which is pretty fun, but we ended up canceling it because it just would have been too much. It was just way too much art resources. Here was the idea. Smolder is the son of whatever dragon rift it is. So if it's an Infernal Rift, he's the son of the Infernal Dragon. If it's an Ocean Rift, he's the son of the Ocean Dragon. It was basically like, Smolder is a baby dragon, and the baby dragon he is whatever dragon is the rift. And so every single game, you would have a slightly different Smolder, and his Q would change based on what the rift was. So if it was Infernal Rift, his Q would explode. If it was a Ocean Rift, his Q would slow. If it was a Chemtech Rift, his Q would poison you, stuff like that. And so basically every single, and then his mom would have been, whichever dragon it was, right? And so that was the idea there, is Smolder shared a type with whatever dragon the rift was. That ended up being non-tenable for 2 reasons. Number 1 was just a production thing. Making 8 different Smolders or whatever is just, that's a lot from an art perspective. And the other issue is it actually felt very random in a bad way. It was kind of like, it was definitely cool to have different Qs, but like imagine you like get into the game and it's like, oh man, it's the Infernal Rift and I really need that slow. It's like, well, unlucky for you, you didn't get the slow on your Q this game. I guess you can't slow any champions. I guess you can't deal with that character who needs to be slowed. And so there was this like random aspect to it that ended up feeling pretty bad that we would have needed to figure out. So anyways, though, it was fun. It was a really cool like take and very thematic. But just ended up not working out from an art and like balancing standpoint.
My biggest problem with the current game direction is the team is valuing stats more and more. Stats are an indicator and can be interpreted in so many ways. The team seems to use stats so they can justify their decisions to the community to avoid backlash. I think that is a very reasonable concern, Misuto. The thing about statistics that is good is that it is easy to use statistics to get a team of people with a variety of different opinions aligned in the same direction. And so what I mean by that is, let's say I feel one way, and I'm like, JINX should be the strongest character in League of Legends. And Captain Gameplay feels a different way. He's like, well, JINX can't be the strongest character in League of Legends because Katarina should be the strongest character in League of Legends, right? And we both have our own opinions. It can sometimes be hard for us to gain alignment between those opinions, gain like, a mutual understanding. And just imagine how complex that gets when you have like, 10, 15 different people with different opinions. The thing that stats do is that they tend to be a less biased way to like get a shared understanding. Now, that doesn't mean that stats can't be biased, though. Like, stats can be incredibly biased. The way you interpret stats can be very biased depending on the situation. So it's definitely not a foolproof thing. And I think it's actually a very reasonable criticism. I think it's a very reasonable criticism that, like, stats might not be the best way to create the best balanced or the best most fun game. I'll give an example of this, actually, and this is actually, it's in regards to JINX. So this probably doesn't seem as relevant nowadays, but it was a big deal back in 2012, is in 2012, JINX came out with a very different body type in terms of just female characters in League of Legends. If you looked at female characters in League of Legends in 2012, before JINX came out, there was a very specific body type that most women had. And this is actually the case across the games industry. The games industry, I think, at the time, and to some degree even still today, has a problem where they tended to default to, a very small set of body types for female characters. I think, like, this is, like, there's a joke here. Let's see. WoW, female versus male. I think this is the meme. Where is it? Let's see if I can find it. Oh, it's this. I think this is really relevant because, like, it kind of shows, like, I think a problem that the games industry has historically had, and I think it's gotten better at it over the years, but I think it's still a very, like, real issue. And so, at the time, JINX, it was actually, like, a pretty big deal that JINX had this different body type. And at the time, if you looked at stats for, like, the most popular characters, they would have indicated something very specific, which is, this is how you make a character. And so whenever you're making a character that kind of, like, breaks that mold, the stats aren't necessarily going to tell you that that's going to be successful or work. And so I think that's, like, an example, but I think one of the things that's, like, just really dangerous about relying on stats as, like, the only source of truth or becoming too reliant on them is stats can be very good at telling you what is, but even that is a little questionable because, there's so many different ways to interpret them, but they're not as good at telling you what could be, right? Like, another example of this would have been, like, say something like League esports. Riot years ago made this huge bet on esports, and we were like, we think esports could be a big thing. And nowadays, League is a pretty big esport, right? But, like, back in the day, if you looked at, like, the season 1 tournament in Freak's Basement, that's a joke, it happened at, like, just like DreamHack or something, you might not have thought, based on the stats of that it could ever get to this, massive thing that it is today. And so, yeah. And so it's just this question of, oh my God, Tiffy's here. So Tiffy is a stats person. So she's here and she's probably like, oh my God, August is flaming stats. How could he? Oh, Hero, good to see you. Hero, we missed you at the club last night. I'm so sad you couldn't show up. It was a fun time. Yeah. But yeah, and so basically what I get at is, like, stats, if I wanted to, like, summarize this question, is I think it is a very reasonable criticism to say that sometimes it can feel like things might be too driven by stats, and stats are a way to gain a shared understanding, but they never really tell you the whole picture, I feel like. And so it's always really important, especially as a designer, to be able to use stats as a way to, help you inform certain things, but also always be making sure that you're also, like, thinking about just the best way you believe the game should be designed and, trying to execute on that. Like, at the end of the day, to me, like, a game like League of Legends, like, we could say that the game is the most balanced when, like, everything is just an exact 50-50 coin flip win rate or something like that. But that might not necessarily be the result that creates, like, the most, compelling and fun characters. It really just depends on a lot of different factors.